So we're here with the long rim, hoping the mic is working. I don't really have a way to check. Seem to be finicky for some reason. So this is the first sort of additional campaign setting that they added to the game. Um, so I thought we'd take a look. I had somewhat mixed feelings of the actual base game itself. The Long Rim, piracy mechs and mixed drinks at the edge of known space. A supplement for Lancer RPG. Lancer The Long Rim by Miguel Lopez and Tom Parkinson Morgan. Edited by Melody Watson, layout by Minerva McJanda. Cover art by Tom Parkinson Morgan. Interior art by Tom Parkinson Morgan and Tom Wan G. 2020 Mastiff Press. Ring 11, Rauco Station. The Last Dancer, a bar on Rauco's outbound concourse popular with charter captains and crew. Below this dark small bar, clear panels provide a view of the heavy interstellar freighters maneuvering to and from the docks of Rauco Station. Attended by flights of harbor pilots and hired escorts, all are bound for the Dawnline shore, the next great frontier. You decided to wait station-side for your ship's queue number to be called. It'll probably be a few more hours. Rauco is a massive blink station, the last before the Long Rim, and your ship needed a fair bit of work besides. Micrometeorite patching, restocking of potables, preserves, and perishables, cycling, ammunition recharging, etc. This bar, The Last Dancer, came via the recommendation of some dock workers. Now you're getting your ear talked off by a scarred old cosmopolitan charter officer. Your drinking companion has some thoughts about the rim. Since you're taking the slow route, you bought him a drink. Research you'll tell your CO. The spacer takes a sip and winds up for his speech, practiced but no less genuine. The Long Rim is a place that doesn't exist in the minds of the gent that live outside it, he says. To them it's a pass-through, a no-see. Lock the visibles and go for a sleep while your ship burns on through. He shakes his head. It's a whole lot more than that. You got time for a listen. Settle in and keep that tab open. Here's what you need to know. Section 0. Long Rim, Places, and People. That's one thing I didn't like when previewing this PDF. There are no unified versions of any of the spreads, which it's funny because on the page for it, they had them, so, or at least one, so they exist. Um, just a slight annoyance, but that's only because all the art's so great. The Long Rim. Toward the proximal end of the Orion Arm, from Cradle and the capital worlds of humanity, lies a patch of space with no official designation. This empty transit corridor is known as the Long Rim. The rim is an off-map territory, a blank space on the galactic chart. not for want of travel, but for a dearth of habitable worlds. On paper, it is a barren no man's land, choked with space junk, littered with mined out rocks and remnants of old battles, a place where humanity's debris coalesces, whether by the complex ballet of competing gravities or deliberate direction. In reality, the Long Rim is the primary thoroughfare for ships traveling between Rauco Station, the furthest blink gate from the galactic core, and Dawnline Shore, a hotly contested frontier territory, often left out of the larger narratives that grip the galaxy. Long Rim has become one of the largest and most heavily trafficked sublink shipping lanes in known space, moving billions of tons of food, medical supplies, construction equipment, electronics, colonists, and materiel in a steady stream. But the Rim is not the transitive liminal space that most assume it to be. It is home to hundreds of habitats, the first of which were built out of necessity by the earliest colonists and prospectors headed to the Dawnline Shore centuries ago. The Rim is a place of extreme hardship and loose regulations. So far, from Union's three pillars as to be ignorant of them. That distance, literal and cultural, makes a place of opportunity as much as one of danger. In the Rim, scarcity is king, and the stories told at station bars are not tales of Union deployments on worlds crying for help, but of cash made, reputations won, and vital minutes of fresh water secured. Pilgrims and headhunters. Land hunters and refugees. Small-time mercenaries and charter captains. Horizon collectivists and Horus adherents. The people at Union's margins find a perilous but potentially profitable home in the Long Rim. It is a wild place, often violent, with total control held by no central power. To whatever extent the Long Rim It is a wild place, often violent, with total control held by no central power. To whatever extent the Rim's denizens can be said to share a consensus, they do not mind the absence of central power. Yes, life can be fast and cheap, but it is also free of Union's vast bureaucracy. A person can disappear, free of Union's hegemony. Legends can be made. Of course, only those who survive get to tell their stories. Ask the bodies drifting in the void of space what they think of the Rim. Ask the people whose ships are turned away from every port what riches stand to be made. Ask the people who glance nervously at the muscled goon in the shadows of the bar before they speak what freedom they feel. Out in the Rim, in the empty border between prosperity and promise, Union's utopia seems distant. This is a place, the population of which, if they can be described as such, will need to lean on the Rim's beguiling promises and save themselves. Life in the void. There are no habitable worlds in the Rim. If you live within its bounds, you either live on a free-floating station or in a habitat built into a directed asteroid with the borders of one's home defined by the thickness of its walls. People here are manifestly aware of the pressures that define their lives. By and large, life in the rim is precarious. Breathable air is recycled, processed, extracted, filtered, and piped in by oxygen miners or sold to the elite by O2 artisans. Sunlight and potable water are distributed to local populations by utility barons who sit on piles of manna and local scrip. Landlords hold titles to stations, extracting rent from the populations marooned there, while limited green spaces exist, are confined to greenhouse stations, tenuous, neutral grounds monitored by local powers aware of how vital fresh food is. The rim's population, both indigenous and migratory, are resourceful, canny, and share a cultural impulse to prepare for the worst. In an environment where a loose bolt or a water leak could spell death for you, your family, and your neighbors, people are inclined towards rigor, awareness, and triple checking their seals, tools, and selves. Far from how intergalactic media often depicts them, the people of the Rim are generally cooperative and collaborative. Out in the dark, there's no one but you and the people on your ship, station, or skiff. It's better that folks work together and live than stand alone and die. The Rim is densely but unevenly inhabited. Permanent populations are limited to a handful of large stations, and they continue to grow as the traffic between Rauco Station and the Dawnline Shore persists. A little less than half of all stations in the Rim house permanent local populations that have resided on them for generations across hundreds of real-time years. The rest of the Rim's population at any given time is itinerant, migrants or those passing through on work or leave. Some stations are little more than groups of freighters, connected by reinforced umbilicals, leashed together and moving at match speeds. Others are cities built into or across massive asteroids, sometimes home to hundreds of thousands of souls. Most fall somewhere in the middle, humble or hidden stations with fresh enough air, good enough food, and permanent populations numbering from the hundreds to the thousands. In function, these stations vary from systemic or organic fueling points to trade bazaars, shipyards, smuggling havens, barracks, and myriad other services needed by the ships that pass through or the people that live in the Rim. In practice, most stations are completely outside union or corporate law. If a station has an organizing or governing body, it falls under that body's own system of judgment or justice. A good rule of thumb is that the larger the station, the more local law it will have. Though that can be a good or a bad thing, depending on one's predilections. With artificial gravity technologies not yet stable for civilian use, permanent habitats must generate gravities of their own using spin. Stations that are little more than clusters of freighters lashed together can fire oppositional thrusters to create this gravity. Large purpose-built stations often feature rings or drums anchored to a central spine or terminus. These rings spin fast enough to create anywhere from 0.8 to 1 G on their inner surfaces. Some spin a little faster or a little slower, creating environments with higher or lower gravity. The interiors of these spinning habitats are where people live and work. The closer one moves to the center of the station, the lower the gravitational force becomes until it is essentially null. A few of the more impressive stations feature drums or toroids dozens of kilometers in diameter. Such stations are supported by titanic solar nets that generate artificial sunlight, allowing crops to be grown and an approximation of terrestrial life. These major hubs represent incredible feats of engineering and are usually the products of significant investments in time and resources from corporates, union departments, or massively wealthy diaspora and benefactors. Outside the net. Due to the lack of direct union presence, most of the rim, essentially everything beyond the major stations, is not yet tapped into the OmniNet. Recognition campaigns have been launched by some stations proximal to Rauco Station and the Dawn Line shore, but it is likely to be some time before total coverage is established. Local populations speak of blank space dead zones, or even using long-range omnihooks. The OmniNet is completely inaccessible, an impossible phenomenon, in theory at least. Explanations reside firmly in the realm of rumor and speculation, from ownic infiltration to the presence of single-point entities. The haunting of egregorian or Valadoran ghosts, and so on. Both Union and Corpro paralogicians have been sent to follow up on these theories, but the liminal reality of the rim has made tracking down specific answers to manifold legends a difficult and dangerous prospect. The absence of reliable OmniNet access means that many of the luxuries enjoyed by the worlds in the galactic core, and even the colonial worlds of the Dawn Line shore, Omni communications, printing, and other technologies that rely on blink space become extremely spotty and prone to error. The locations of stations are based on blink coverage as often as they are determined by real space considerations. Piracy and the Enterprise Agreement. It is an odd thing to be a pirate in a lawless space. Your victims are often those who most states, if any, cared enough to try and extend their law into the rim, would also call pirates. Small-scale raiding, robbery, and larceny are common enough across both permanent and transient populations. Big hauls, the looting of colony ships in transit, or corporo vessels on assignment are comparatively rare. But dramatically more common in the rim than in any other sector of space. Until the Dawn Line shore gate is complete, real space transit through the rim remains necessary, and so private, state, and corporate ventures mark rim-based pirates as a threat, or simply the cost of doing business. Official missions and expeditions dispatched by major powers, like IPS North Star, Harrison Armory, and the Karakin Trade Baronies, are generally left unmolested by pirates and voidjacks of the rim. Even so, the major powers recommend that their people cross the rim in numbers with security and accompanied by reputable guides or fixers with flight plans forwarded out to stations with prior negotiated protection contracts. These full transit packages are expensive, and most non-state or corporal state ventures bound for the shore or the core can only afford one or two of these four necessities. These parties, private ventures, chartered colonies, shipments from smaller corporates, and so on, are the primary victims of piracy in the Rim. The pirate's life. Contrary to popular omnidiorama depictions of pirates as bloodthirsty marauders, most raiding in the Rim is undertaken by part-time pirates coming together for specific ventures, not permanent organizations or long-standing crews. These single ventures range from families banding together to attack a passing ship for supplies, to station-side gangs boosting a docked freighter for ransom, to disgruntled charter captains launching a raid on their station master's private yacht. The few permanent pirate ventures that do exist in the Rim are organized groups of armed professionals supported by local bureaucrats and the enterprises of the Long Rim. Essentially, pirates in the Rim are non-chartered mercenary companies operating on long-term or single-mission contracts. By and large, professional piracy groups in the Rim are used to collect enterprise taxes, both from local populations and a percentage off the top of all cargo or mana passing through the Rim, settle grudges, and operate as hired muscle. Exorbitant as these taxes may be, and though they often end in violence, they ultimately fund the survival of the masses who call the Rim their home. Of course, the spoils only trickle down, and their distribution is far from even. More vicious acts of piracy, kidnapping, trafficking, and the wholesale looting and resale of captured ships are not unheard of. Even professional pirates are willing to get dirty to get what they want. Generally speaking, however, professional pirate groups and the enterprises that employ them seek to avoid too much savagery lest they draw the attention of one or more of the galaxy's major powers. The Enterprise Agreement. Unless they are of rare independent wealth, professional pirate groups operate under the contract of one of the Long Rim's enterprises, the closest thing the Rim has to state powers. You'll find more information on the Long Rim's canonical enterprises later, but for now, whether commercial, religious, or criminal, these syndicates are organized into administrative bodies oriented around the expansion of their shared mission. Above all else, the accumulation of wealth. The enterprises in the Long Rim are primarily funded by their command and control over both necessary and luxury goods and services in the Rim, the taxes, rents, and debts they extract from local populations, and the spoils they receive from the mercenary operations undertaken by the pirate groups under their jurisdictions. The Long Rim's enterprises range in their Darwinian cruelty, but even the kindest among them tend to combine a selfish, materialistic paradigm with the warlord's impulse towards total control over the stations within their spheres of dominance. The diplomacy they maintain with their neighbors is entirely transactional and undertaken with designs always to one-up their rivals, trading in goods, services, labor, and prizes won through piracy. The scrambling and maneuvering for power ensures that no single enterprise is large enough to become dominant, though the threat remains that one of the enterprises may claw its way to the top of the pile. Enterprises, less so the pirates they employ, who being closer to the people and often of the people, tend to be kinder to the people, are widely regarded as oppressive by the populations of the Long Rim. Against their power, though, there is little an average person can do. As with everything in the Rim, survival is the most important thing. Most populations knuckle under and choose to work with their local enterprise rather than against them. Pacification and persistence. Though there have been many small-scale attempts to secure the Rim, the area remains stubbornly untamable for two main reasons. Beyond the cost, time, and danger. First, The enormous number of uncatalogued and extra-legal stations among the debris and asteroid fields provide ready hideouts, bolt holes, and warrants for pirate groups to disappear. The scale of the Long Rim, its crowded stations, its transient populations, and the lack of ready outside intelligence on the area make disappearing easy for those intent on remaining hidden. The second issue is that almost all small-scale piracy is undertaken by desperate local populations as a primary means of subsistence. It is often difficult for outsiders to distinguish between pirates and the ordinary population of any given station. Someone might spend the bulk of their time farming hydroponic vegetables, all the while ready to volunteer for a percentage of the haul when word comes of a vulnerable cargo ship in the area and a crew being assembled to raid it. Enforcement applied with too heavy, cruel, or ignorant a hand can lead to the death of dozens or even hundreds of families waiting on unregistered stations for their lifelines to return. While the larger enterprises may well be dismantled in time, rooting out piracy in the Rim risks the eradication of hundreds of unique cultures and populations as a result of careless, narrow-mission uses of state force. A gentler hand is needed in the long run, either that or a total disregard for humanitarian concerns. Building the Long Rim. To help you populate the Long Rim, we've included a series of tables to get your creativity going. From developing stations to identifying pirate groups, to naming and putting a human face on the Rim's powerful enterprises, you can go through these tables in any order, though it's best to progress through them in the order that you encounter them. Station Generator. The Long Rim is full of an extraordinary range of stations, differing in size, function, and legality. You can roll on the tables below to generate stations or create your own based on the prompts provided. We're not going to read through all of these. I'll pick a couple at random. Station Seed. Multitudinous characteristics of stations in the Rim are too numerous to be listed in full. Instead, the following station seeds can be used as starting points for you to build out further characterization of the station's inhabitants, their history, and its industries. 5 to 6. A well-known IPS Northstar refueling station, neutral ground for trade and services. This station is frequented by IPSN's trunk security and serves as a local base for the Corpo's patrol cutters. The central ring is full of the parked ships and charter captains ready and willing to run any job you need for the right price. 11 to 12. An enormous domed Volodar trade bazaar with stable artificial gravity. Although they originally built it, those Volodars have not been here for hundreds of subjective years. It has largely been taken over by outside construction, and now it serves as a capital station for a powerful enterprise. 17 to 18. A decommissioned Harrison Armory Legion outpost from the first online colonization push, now a playground for long-haul freighter crews. It is filled with nightclubs, gambling dens, and pleasure houses. As with most places in the Rim, anything goes here if you've got the mana. This station is popular with professional pirates from many enterprises who see it as a neutral ground where they can have a good time. Station name. Station names are as diverse as the people that call them home. Here are a few suggestions to help you get started. some more names for districts on larger stations, and then another table for that's kind of interesting that they have separate table for purpose, because on a lot of these in the primary table you've already got sort of ingrained purposes, so I suppose those are more useful. I don't know. I think if you're going to be creating a station from scratch, you already kind of, so I'm not really sure what the what the purpose of having that table is. Curiosities. Just like every station in the rim has a purpose, every station has some sort of curiosity, a thing that makes it stand out in your memory, for good or for ill. On the following table, roll for 1 or 2 curiosities, depending on the size of the station. Larger stations can have dozens of points of interest, gathering sports, cultural quirks, while small stations might have 1 or 2. I think I'm going to start to need to bring dice if I keep doing this, and there's more tables. That might be a better way. I'm surprised I never thought of it during the last book. We'll add 2. A wizened hermit who can see the future with about 50% accuracy for any given reading. You can roll for this if you like. They can't see more than a day or 2 into the future and live mostly off donations. They claim to be a former operative of the UIB who acquired their abilities during clandestine operations. 3. A large population of feral kraits, dog-sized crustaceans that have adapted almost perfectly for life on stations. They make excellent pets, produce very little waste, and consume very little food or water. 7. A Horus Techno-Cult blister attached to the side of the station by a punch corridor and several umbilicals. The cult trades for food with locals in return for information. Station admin steadfastly denies their existence despite their operation being in plain sight. 16. An inactive IPSM Tortuga has been welded into the station wall and serves as a power source. It is seen as a mascot or guardian by the locals. 17. Down a back alley maintenance corridor behind a bar, seekers can find gliss. These crustaceans have powerful narcotic effects. Most people smoke them right out of their shells. 20. The House of Cats, a jazz cafe, bar, restaurant, gambling parlor, and house of courtesans, is never closed, extremely loud, and designed to drain all your loose mana and station credit. The establishment is garishly decorated in the style of Voltairean palatial estates. It offers a fun time, but it's dangerous to get too attached. I wonder if that's a typo. There were several, I believe, in the first book. I think this will be our last table for today. Problems. Every station got by default, these problems will begin to get worse without intervention, usually the player characters. Roll 1 or 2, depending on the size of the station, then click start the clock. 5. The station administrator's child has gone missing. 8. There's been another gruesome murder, 3rd in a month. It's clear now there's a serial killer on this station. 10. An unregistered skip vessel from the Dawnline shore has docked at the station. The passengers claim to be political dissidents in need of sanctuary, which has sparked a divisive debate aboard the station. Some think they should be granted asylum, while others fret about the station's resource budget. All the while, a Harrison Armory or Carrican patrol burns toward the station, sure to spark a confrontation when they arrive. 17. The station was recently abandoned by Harrison Armory, who pulled almost all funding, resources, security, and left without explanation. The local population, beleaguered, is searching for answers. Meanwhile, a skeleton team of Armory personnel can be seen operating in sealed-off sections, unresponsive to the local population's petitions for information. 19. A Horus cell keeps threatening to redirect an asteroid into the station if they're not paid at regular intervals. Not going to read this, but quick generator for NPCs with a descriptor, a primary occupation, and alternative occupation. Some quirks, their primary motivation, and then it looks like a table for generating a cocktail of choice. That will be it for today. I'm not sure if I'm streaming tomorrow. If I am, if I do, I'll probably have a bit more time on my hands, so we might just try and blaze through this, and that way I can do a box opening or maybe some other content before we start on Mothership on Tuesday. But that will be it for today.